I was standing in the emergency room when they brought him in. A young Marine, barely 23 years old, bleeding internally, bones shattered from a fall during training. His vital signs were crashing fast. The lead surgeon looked at the monitors, shook his head, and said we should make him comfortable. But the Marine kept repeating something that haunted me. It's too late. Don't try. Everyone seemed ready to accept that. Everyone except me, because I saw something they didn't. A detail so small, so easy to miss, that it almost cost him his life. What I did next would save him, but it would also put my entire career on the line. My name is Danielle Hartman, and this is the story of the night I had to choose between following orders and following my instincts. My name is Danielle Hartman, and I've been an emergency room nurse for 12 years. I grew up in a small town in rural Texas, where everyone knew everyone, and helping your neighbor wasn't just expected, it was a way of life. My mother was a school teacher, my father worked construction, and they taught me early that responsibility and compassion weren't just words, they were actions. I got married young to a paramedic I met during nursing school. We had 2 kids together, built what I thought was a solid life, but after 10 years the cracks started showing. The divorce was messy, painful, and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. I needed a fresh start, so 5 years ago, I packed up my 2 teenage kids and moved to San Diego, California. The city was overwhelming at first. The pace, the noise, the sheer number of people. But the hospital where I got hired specialized in trauma cases, especially military personnel from the nearby naval bases. It was intense, demanding, and exactly what I needed to rebuild my sense of purpose. I worked night shifts mostly, which meant my days were spent shuttling kids to school, helping with homework, and trying to maintain some semblance of normal family life. My son was 15, my daughter 13, and both were struggling to adjust to the move. I was dating someone new, a kind man named Greg, who worked in construction, and tried his best to understand the weight I carried home from every shift. But how do you explain to someone the things you see in an emergency room? The split-second decisions, the lives that slip through your fingers, the ones you managed to pull back from the edge. San Diego became my second chance. The hospital became my proving ground, and I was determined not to waste either. If this story has already pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next is going to surprise you even more. It was a Tuesday night in October, the kind of night where the rain hits the pavement so hard it sounds like static. I was 6 hours into my shift when the call came through. Incoming trauma. Male, 23. Military. Fall from approximately 20 feet during a training exercise. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, unconscious at the scene but regained consciousness en route. When the ambulance doors flew open, I saw him, Corporal Ethan Cross, pale, drenched in rain and blood, but his eyes were open, alert, and that's what struck me first. For someone with injuries that severe, he was too calm, too resigned. The paramedics rushed him into the trauma bay. I immediately started taking vitals while the team swarmed around him. Dr. Marshall, our lead trauma surgeon, was there within minutes. He was a man in his late 50s, brilliant but exhausted by years of seeing the worst humanity had to offer. He did a quick assessment, palpating Ethan's abdomen, checking pupil response, reviewing the preliminary scans from the field. And then Ethan spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. It's too late. Don't try. Dr. Marshall looked at him, then at the monitors. Heart rate dropping. Blood pressure unstable. Internal bleeding likely from the liver or spleen. Fractures to the ribs, pelvis, left femur. The doctor's face changed. I'd seen that look before. It was the look of someone making a calculation, weighing the odds, and deciding they weren't good enough. Let's make him comfortable, Dr. Marshall said quietly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The other nurses began slowing down, switching from emergency protocol to palliative care. Someone prepared morphine. The room, which moments ago had been electric with urgency, suddenly felt heavy, defeated, but I couldn't move. I stood there, staring at Ethan, and something inside me screamed that this was wrong. Thank you for sticking with me this far. That means you're feeling what I felt when I lived through this. So go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell, because what comes next changes everything. I kept staring at Ethan, at the way his body was positioned, at the pattern of bruising across his torso and arms. I'd seen hundreds of fall victims. The injury pattern didn't match. A 20-foot frontal fall should have caused different damage, more facial trauma, different rib fractures, but Ethan's injuries suggested lateral impact, like he'd been hit from the side or had rolled. And then I noticed his left pupil. It was sluggish, not completely unresponsive, but delayed. That could mean a subdural hematoma, a bleed in the brain that, if caught early, could be drained. Survivable. I moved closer to Dr. Marshall. Doctor, I think we need a CT scan. His pupils aren't equal, and the injury pattern doesn't match the reported mechanism. He barely looked at me. Hartman, we don't have time for unnecessary imaging. He's bleeding out, but if there's a subdural hematoma, we could— You're not a surgeon, he cut me off. His tone was sharp, final. Let us handle this. I felt my face flush. Around me, the other staff were preparing to step back, to let Ethan go, and he just lay there, eyes half closed, whispering, "Too late, too late." I made a decision. I walked out of the trauma bay, went straight to radiology, and found Dr. Kim, the on-call radiologist. "I need an emergency head CT on the trauma in Bay 3. Possible subdural hematoma." She frowned. "Did Dr. Marshall order this?" "It's a second opinion protocol," I said, bending the truth just enough. She hesitated, but nodded. "Get him down here." I went back, told the transport team to move Ethan to CT, and when Dr. Marshall saw what was happening, his face went red. "What the hell are you doing?" "Getting a scan that might save his life," I said. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. The CT took 8 minutes. When the images came back, my heart nearly stopped. There it was, a subdural hematoma on the left side, causing significant pressure. And the internal bleeding, while serious, was localized and potentially controllable. Ethan had a chance, a real chance. I printed the images and walked back into the trauma bay. Dr. Marshall was at the nurse's station, filling out paperwork. I put the films in front of him. "He has a subdural hematoma, and the abdominal bleeding is contained to the spleen. Both are operable." He stared at the images, then at me. His jaw tightened. "You ordered a scan without my authorization." "I ordered a scan that might save his life," I repeated. The other doctors and nurses in the room had stopped what they were doing. Everyone was watching. "You don't get to make that call, Hartman," Dr. Marshall said, his voice rising. "You've put this hospital at legal risk. You violated protocol, and you've undermined my authority as the attending physician." "I don't care about protocol," I said, and I could feel my voice shaking now. "I care about that kid in there who's about to die because we gave up too soon." Before he could respond, the monitor alarms blared. Ethan was crashing. Cardiac arrest. I didn't wait for permission. I ran to his side and started chest compressions. "Someone get the crash cart. We need to get him to the OR now." Dr. Marshall stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then he cursed under his breath. "Fine. Prep for emergency surgery. But this isn't over, Hartman." I didn't care. All I cared about was keeping Ethan alive long enough to get him to the operating room. And the surgery took 4 hours. I stayed in the OR as the assisting nurse, even though Dr. Marshall made it clear he didn't want me there. But the OR supervisor allowed it, probably because she knew I was the one who'd pushed for the intervention in the first place. The atmosphere was tense. Dr. Marshall barely spoke except to give orders. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he worked. The subdural hematoma was drained successfully. The pressure on Ethan's brain released, and his vitals stabilized almost immediately. Then they moved to the abdomen. The spleen was lacerated, but not beyond repair. They controlled the bleeding, stitched what needed stitching, and monitored him closely for any other complications. When they finally closed him up, the room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Ethan was alive, stable. He'd make it to the ICU. When we wheeled him out, I felt my legs almost give out. The adrenaline crash hit me like a wave. I sat down in the hallway outside the OR, put my head in my hands, and let myself shake. I'd saved him, but I knew deep down that the real fight was just beginning. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments. It's incredible to see people from so many places following stories like this. And 2 days later, I was called into human resources. My supervisor was there. So was the hospital's risk management officer. They informed me that I was being formally written up for insubordination and violation of medical protocol. Dr. Marshall had filed a complaint. He claimed I had acted recklessly, endangered the patient, and created a hostile work environment by challenging his medical judgment in front of staff. I was placed under formal review. That meant every decision I made, every patient interaction, every charting entry would be scrutinized. I felt like I was under a microscope. The atmosphere at work changed almost immediately. Colleagues who used to greet me warmly now avoided eye contact. Nurses I'd worked alongside for years suddenly had nothing to say to me. Dr. Marshall made his displeasure known in subtle ways. He questioned my assessments in front of patients. He reassigned me to less critical cases. He made sure everyone knew I was in trouble. At home, I tried to hold it together for my kids, but they could tell something was wrong. My daughter asked me one night if I was going to lose my job. I told her no, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Greg tried to be supportive, but he didn't understand the complexity of what I was facing. "You saved someone's life," he kept saying. "How can they punish you for that?" But it wasn't that simple. Medicine is built on protocols, hierarchies, chains of command. I'd broken those chains, and there were consequences. The 1 week after the surgery, Ethan Cross woke up. I was making rounds in the ICU when I saw his eyes open. He looked confused at first, disoriented, but when he saw me, something shifted in his expression. Recognition. "You're the nurse," he said, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "You're the one who didn't give up." I felt tears prick my eyes. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," he said, managing a weak smile. "But I'm alive. They told me you're the reason I'm alive." I sat down next to his bed. "You scared scared us pretty badly." He looked away. I scared myself. Over the next hour, Ethan told me his story. 6 months earlier, he'd been deployed overseas with his unit. During a patrol, they were ambushed. His best friend, a Marine named Tyler, was killed right in front of him. Ethan survived without a scratch. He came home, but he couldn't shake the guilt, the feeling that he should have died instead, that he didn't deserve to be alive when Tyler wasn't. The training accident wasn't entirely an accident. He'd been reckless, pushing himself. Part of him, he admitted, wanted something bad to happen. When he woke up in the ambulance and realized how badly he was hurt, he felt relief. And when he heard the doctors saying it was too late, he accepted it. He wanted it to be true. "But then I woke up here," he said quietly. "And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe there was a reason I'm still alive." I didn't know what to say. I just held his hand. Ethan's story spread through the hospital, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of being seen as a miraculous save, it became a point of ethical debate. Some staff argued that I had intervened in the case of someone who might have been exhibiting suicidal behavior, even if unconsciously. That by saving him, I might have violated his autonomy. Others defended me, saying that in the moment, there was no way to know his psychological state, and that our job is to preserve life first and ask questions later. The controversy grew. I was summoned to appear before the hospital's ethics committee. They wanted to review the case in detail, to determine whether my actions were justified or if I had overstepped. I spent sleepless nights preparing, going over every detail, every decision, every word. My lawyer, provided by the nurses' union, advised me to apologize, to accept a temporary suspension, and to move on quietly. "Fighting this will only make it worse," he said, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't apologize for saving someone's life, even if that someone had been struggling, even if the system said I'd broken the rules. The ethics hearing took place on a cold morning in November. The committee consisted of 5 members, 2 doctors, a nurse administrator, a hospital attorney, and a community representative. Dr. Marshall was there to present his side. I was there to present mine. Marshall spoke first. He outlined the facts clinically: my insubordination, the unauthorized scan, the disruption to established protocol. He argued that my actions, while well-intentioned, set a dangerous precedent that could undermine patient care and hospital operations. Then it was my turn. I presented the medical evidence, the CT scan results, the successful surgery, Ethan's recovery, but I didn't stop there. With Ethan's written permission, I shared his testimony. He had written a letter to the committee, describing his mental state that night, his struggle with survivor's guilt, and how waking up and realizing he was alive had given him a reason to seek help. He thanked me for not giving up when he had given up on himself. The room was silent when I finished. Even Dr. Marshall looked uncomfortable. After deliberating for nearly an hour, the committee returned with their decision. They acknowledged that I had acted outside of standard protocol, but they also recognized that my clinical judgment had been sound and that my actions had saved a life. The formal complaint was dismissed. Dr. Marshall was quietly advised to reevaluate his leadership approach and to consider the value of nursing input in critical cases. I wasn't suspended, but I also wasn't fully vindicated. The damage to my professional relationships had been done. 3 months later, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. He'd undergone physical therapy, regained most of his mobility, and had started seeing a counselor who specialized in PTSD and survivor's guilt. Before he left San Diego to return home to Oregon, he came to see me. We sat in the hospital cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee, and talked for over an hour. He told me he'd decided to leave the Marines, not because he couldn't serve anymore, but because he realized he needed to heal first. He was enrolling in college, thinking about becoming a counselor himself to help other veterans who were struggling the way he had. "You gave me a second chance," he said, "not just at life, at living." I told him that all I'd done was trust my gut, that any good nurse would have done the same. He shook his head. "No, you fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. That's different." After he left, I sat there for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. My relationship with Dr. Marshall never fully recovered. Some of my colleagues still kept their distance, but others, especially the younger nurses, started coming to me for advice, for guidance, for reassurance that it was okay to speak up when something felt wrong. I became an advocate for better mental health protocols in emergency medicine, both for patients and for staff. I pushed for training that taught us to recognize signs of trauma, of self-harm, of silent suffering. The hospital eventually implemented some of those changes. My career survived, but more than that, it evolved. I'm still a nurse in San Diego. I still work the night shift. I still see things that haunt me, but I also know that sometimes the most important thing we can do is trust ourselves when everyone else has given up. Ethan taught me that, and I'll never forget it. And that was my story, a story about impossible choices, about trusting yourself yourself when everyone doubts you, and about what it really means to save a life. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have followed orders or trusted your instincts? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I love reading every single one. And if you made it to the end, thank you so much. That means the world to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories from nurses who faced unimaginable situations. And go ahead and let the next video play, because there are more stories that will make you think. See you next time.